Thank you so much for coming here. Today, we want to talk about implementing active learning for your teaching. My name is Megan Lingles. I'm the Director of Learning Experience Design and Online Education. Just letting you know, there are 3 workshops designed for this topic. Today, we're going to talk about really general ideas of how to implement active learning in teaching. And then this Thursday, we want to specifically talking about how to engage students with effective discussion and collaboration, either in the classroom or asynchronously online. And then next Monday, we want to focus on, how to, actually, I'm sorry, 13 is next Monday, and the September 16 is next Thursday. We want to talk about specific tools, how you can create formative assessment or summative assessment to engage students. So we're gonna talk about some tools, maybe like Gradescope or Canvas quiz and all that kind of things. And today's agenda, we're gonna do a little bit of reflection and recall for different modes of teaching. As I mentioned earlier, we talked about different modes of teaching 2 weeks ago. So let's do a little recall to remember we still have a fresh memory. And then we're very honored to have a really great panel from some of the DTI leaders and UCF faculties to talk about how to implement active learning strategies for different types of teaching. And then later on, we want to focus a little bit on digital active learning strategies. And the difference between digital active learning strategies and active learning strategies is like they're different type of technologies that you can implement in your asynchronous kind of teaching. So we want to kind of let you know what kind of information you will have or what kind of tool you will have to create that kind of activity for your students. And finally, we'll have a breakout session. You'll be able to meet with different panel guest speakers to talk about specific topic. So that is today's agenda. Without long overdue, let's get it started here. So these are the 5 modes of teaching that we talked about in the past 2 weeks. And I want to use this chart to remind you that obviously there's no on-site asynchronous, so there's nothing there. And what we are most familiar with is the synchronous on-site, which is traditional classroom. But for online, you actually get 2 different kinds. You have the asynchronous online, which you record your lecture to your students. And if you want to meet with your student live online through Zoom like this is more like a remote. So you still have this kind of synchronous type of interaction. And there are 2 different modes sort of in the middle of this mixed. One is what we call flip learning. And what we say flip is really try to flip a lot of the activities in the at home asynchronously to prepare the active learning activity in the classroom. So everything they do at home and everything they do asynchronous is really prepared for this time we're gonna get together in the classroom. And there's another model, it's called I'm sorry, that was somehow my text doesn't work. So there's another model is hybrid. So hybrid is really between the classroom and online. You want to find a balance in the middle. So there are these 5 modes of teaching. And it obviously depends on which mode you're gonna choose. You'll be more in person, less online, or more online, less in person, and they are all kinds of in between. So those are what we talked about before. Now, here are some examples for active learning strategies. And for those who actually participated in the Active Learning Institute, you may be very familiar with these strategies. I want to take a couple minutes for you to think about some questions. So what kind of active learning strategies are suitable for different modes of teaching? And which one will be suitable for you to implement in fall? And any challenges or solutions that you may think of? So if I click on this link right here, that will take us to a Google Doc. And you can see there's a table here. What I would like to think about, just take a few minutes before our panel started. Let's think about, there are different modes of teaching. Let's say classroom, flip, hybrid. synchronous remote, asynchronous online. What kind of active learning strategies you think is suitable for these modes? So you can put the different strategies here. And then you can also start to think about what kind of challenges to make those things happen. So I put an example here. So for example, challenges to implement active learning for teaching will be maybe students are resistant to engaging. That could be possible. And or activity take too much time and I don't have time to do other things. Or a student don't want to work together. So those could be the challenges that more in general. So let's take a couple minutes as a group. You know, you can either unmute your microphone and talk about it and we'll just type it for you, or you can just go ahead to type it on your own. So let's do that now. So anybody want to just verbally talk about what kind of active learning strategies that you're thinking about implementing? This is a quiet group, so I don't see anybody typing anything yet. So maybe you need a couple minutes to think. And for those who are not familiar with active learning, you may want to think about challenges. So if you choose certain kind of mode, you can think of like what kind of challenges they're there. So if you type in there, maybe we can address that in our pen. Oh, we start to have people putting inputs here. So there's some faculty start to talk about in the classroom active learning strategies. Mini case with worksheet for student to fill in. Very good idea. So that's allow them to, you know, have a reflective pause to digest what you talk about before you move on. Hybrid could be live class work in groups. Yeah, definitely. Asynchronous online could be a small group perusal discussion. It's a wonderful asynchronous online activities because they can annotate an article together and really talk about their thoughts after the reading. That's a great idea. So we have something like, you know, think, pair, share in different breakout rooms. That is a great idea, which we may want to do something like that later if we have time. Hybrid could be interactive videos. So you let students to watch the videos to prepare them for the classroom learning, and then you can put some sort of interactive questions in between the videos. That's great. So let's look at the challenges people are putting in here. So students don't want to be too close when working together. That is really true, especially we're still in this crazy pandemic time. So we may want to think about how we're going to address that. Let's think about that. That's a really good point. So for flipped classroom, students don't know how to prepare for active time. So they may expect a lecture. Yeah, so this is really important. I do want to let everybody know that when you implement an active learning strategy in teaching, student onboarding is a very critical step before you just go ahead to say, oh, that's actively engaging each other. You need to kind of prepare your students' mindset about what they are about to experience in the classroom and what's the purpose to interactive, and letting them know that, you know, what kind of, sometimes it's nice to give them some carrots to do that as well, you know, give them some points. But it is important to prepare your students' mindset that this class is not just you sit there and listen to me talk. I want you to talk more. So that is a very important point. Students check out of the learning, wait for the answer in the classroom. That is very true. So we had to figure out some ideas how to make that happen. Sometimes you may want them to do something before the classroom activity. So once they're in the classroom, they're more ready to jump in instead of just sit there wait for the answer. But you know, every situation is very different. I highly recommend everybody to take advantage of the DTI's office hour consultations and just talk to our instructional designer one-on-one, kind of brainstorm some solution how to solve those challenges, because there may be opportunities and also challenges all happen at the same time. So for hybrid, this is a good point. COVID issue with vocal interaction in person is a big challenge. And I do recognize that we have been dealing with that for a while. So I hope that we all gain some we'll get some skills about managing the situation. Students do not turn on cameras, and it's difficult to gauge understanding. That's true. So who wants to talk first? That's what we happened at the beginning. You know, I learned something from my colleagues, Danny Mann and DTEI. And he actually shared with me that sometimes you just have to have that silence. And somebody's gonna have trouble dealing with silence, and eventually they're gonna talk. And it works for me too. And he also mentioned that this is something could also show the confidence of the instructor. So I have been really trying beyond my comfort zone, just kind of sit there, have a silence, and then people start to talk. That's my own experience. So you may want to try that. And there's something unfamiliar with the technology. Oh, this is another problem. So some faculty have done a little like a pre-assignment, do a little practice assignment for them to get familiar with technology before they go to the real assignment or real activities. So for example, if students are not familiar with Canvas quiz, for example, you may want to create a syllabus course or something like that to practice how to use that. So once you really need to deliver exam, they are ready to know how to do it. Students don't attend to the online, don't attend to the online materials. I guess what you mean is that they didn't review the online material before they jump in. So that's why I always suggest faculty, it's nice to add a little bit of mini assignments. Once you ask them to read a chapter or read an article or ask them to watch a video. And that's a way to check in to make sure they have an opportunity to digest what they read or what they watch. But at the same time, you also get a good sense about what students' understanding level is. So that is a really nice contribution from the group. I really want to thank you. One thing about this kind of activity, not only everybody start to type in stuff while we're kind of reviewing your feedback. At the end of the workshop, you can take this document as a little cheat sheet, you know, to figure it out. Not necessarily the challenges. Challenges to prepare our mindset when we teach. Like we need to come up with a solution to deal with that. But you know, these are the active learning ideas we're gonna do. So so that's kind of continue. Feel free to fill out this form, but I'm gonna continue with our session today. So I want to remind everybody about these 5 principles of quality course design. And active learning actually fulfills 2 of the 5 principles. One is you were able to help students to connect with each other, and then you also will help students to building that self-regulation support. When you build these kind of content related interactive activities. So they are pretty important for our teaching. Now I'm going to start share with you a whole bunch of resources that you can think about active learning. I love this article called Engaging Online Activities. There's something about how you can incorporate active learning into your classroom. They are all wonderful resources. If you have some time, feel free to scan them and see if you can get something useful to for your teaching. So that's all about me today. Our next session is our wonderful panel discussion. That's the most popular event of our workshop because we have wonderful panel always be able to share their insight with us. Today, it's our honor to have Matt, 2 Matts actually from DTI and Adrian from biology to talk about how do you implement active learning strategies in teaching, and Bo Choi, our instructional designer, will be the panel moderator. So without long overdue, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing, and then Bo, you can go ahead to unmute your microphone and start the panel session.
Well, thank you so much for coming, everybody, to coming. And that exercise is always kind of, help us to kind of, open our eyes a little bit before we actually jump into the actual very topic. And it's a topic that actually a lot of UCI faculty are very interested in. And I am so honored to be here to run this panel discussion with 3 three people, special people at UCI. So long over, I'm not gonna to share much, but I'm gonna actually ask all three of you to actually introduce yourself, and then also to share why active learning is important. So we could start with Adrian, and then second will be Matthew Mahavontrako, and then third will be Matthew Williams.
Woohoo, I get to go first, so I get the easiest why active learning is awesome answer. My name is Adrian Williams, and I'm an assistant professor of teaching in the Department of Developmental and Cell Biology. I teach 3 large classes every year: introductory biology, scientific writing, and anatomy. And the reason I really like active learning is because the research on teaching in STEM indicates that it is the most successful for student learning, and also is more successful than any other method at reducing opportunity gaps for students that have historically been excluded from STEM.
Thank you for taking the one that I was going to say. Hi, everyone. My name is Matt. I am a postdoc at the Division of Teaching Excellence and Innovation. I have kind of an awkward teaching position. So I teach a large lecture Bio 99 course over the summer. I've been doing that for 7 years. Then I also teach grad students, postdocs, and faculty on pedagogy. And I do a lot of consultations, and that's my background. Besides the reason that Adrian stole from me for why active learning is so great, I also like how active learning can serve as sort of a kind of checking the temperature of the room to see how the students are doing, how are they feeling, trying to re-energize them in a way that has them actively engaged with the content, but also it gives me, as well as my instructional staff, plenty of opportunity to break down, let's say, in my case, a 200-person class into very small sections so that we can engage with the students on a more intimate level.
Hi, and I'm Matt Williams. I'm with Division of Teaching Excellence and Innovation. And my role there is really focused on improving underlying infrastructure and learning environments at UCI so that they better support practices that we know are effective, like active learning. And one of my big roles has been supporting active learning classrooms and trying to create more of them on campus. Yeah, the previous 2 answers were great. I will just add, I think one benefit of active learning is that it helps expose students and model effective learning strategies. A lot of the kinds of active learning activities that you might use can be translated by students into other study skills, even for courses that don't use a lot of active learning. And I've heard from a number of students that once they have some exposure to this, either because they're required or because it was used in their class, some of them do take those kinds of things and apply them to other courses, even if they don't use active learning there.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all your sharing. And so as I wanted to just take a moment, as you all probably already recognize, all 3 of these great people are actually their expertise in the different area. So Adrian Williams, she's a faculty and has implemented a lot of active learning strategy in her course. And Matthew Mahavontrako is a person to also share about the pedagogical strategy in active learning to both faculty as well as the TAs, grad students in their class. So how can they to implement that? And Matthew Williams here, that we also invited, that he's expert and also have many things to share in terms of a classroom technology, which I know many of you are kind of interested in that area too, because when you're not sure, I saw, all this hybrid, flipped, all fully online, asynchronous, and all those things, then you want to know what's available for me to do. So having said that, I would like to, so I had a specific question actually for in each panel here. So I'm going to start with Matt Williams here. So just, with the just given situation here, we are not sure, or like, this is pandemics happen. Well, we haven't started our school yet, but something to be prepared and something that you wanted to share with your all this faculty here. What kind of faculty take an advantage of classroom technology that to engage students in the classroom? And if so, what are the things that is available for them to access? So Matt.
So I know this is covered in other areas, but I think as a starting point, it's important to consider the goals of particular activities. So whether it's the student's first exposure to that topic and they're just learning about it, whether you want them to debate or analyze a topic in an open-ended way, whether you're trying to get them to practice with a specific procedure or steps. In terms of classrooms, there are two kind of non-technology answers that I want to give before I get into technology. The first is the physical space. So I think many faculty who have been on campus are familiar with the Anteater Learning Pavilion and a lot of the new classrooms we put in there. We focused on a few key areas. One is having furniture that is either flexible or already groups students into groups of about 6. We focus on making sure there's enough spacing so that faculty, TAs, peer learning assistants can actually get around to the room, different areas of the room, and providing enough writing surfaces that students can actually use those as part of an activity. And the other non-tech answer, I wouldn't overlook, just paper and pencil for basic things. Whether it's what we call an exit ticket at the end, that 1-minute reflection at the end of a class. There are some other interesting things like, scratch off group quizzes that we could probably share a link out to for those who aren't familiar with those. So, active learning can be done in a number of different ways. It doesn't rely on a specific classroom or specific technology, but they can be helpful. So I'll mention a couple specific ones. One is in a lot of classrooms at UCI, there's now the ability to project wirelessly from like an iPad, which allows you to get away from the lectern and actually get around to students while still being able to control what's being displayed. And you can even turn that over, if you're comfortable, to allow students to project as well. We have a handful of classrooms that actually have shared student displays where every group of 6 has access to a display and can do various things. The other big category is polling tools. So we now have a campus license for Poll Everywhere, which we're really trying to push over things like iClickers, which have a upfront hardware cost for students. And you can do ask a lot of different kinds of questions to students and have them respond with their laptop, tablet, smartphone. It's similar for those of you that might use Kahoot or Mentimeter. It has similar functionality to those. And the third major area I'll mention is just the wide range of web-based tools that you may already use for other online classes or hybrid courses, whether it's Canvas, Google Docs, Perusal. All of those kinds of tools can be used in a classroom setting. With the pandemic, as bad as it's been, one thing it has shed light on is device access for students, and a lot more students have been able to get help with getting devices. And I hope that's something that can continue so that we can leverage those in classrooms. Yeah, and I think the tools can be introduced really at any point within an activity. You may have a very rich and meaningful discussion and that doesn't involve any technology, but you have that final 2 minutes where you're asking them to fill out, a short question in Canvas to make sure, one for accountability and one to promote kind of reflection. So hopefully that's enough information for now. I'm happy to break into other topics as we need.
Thanks, Matt. I mean, it's really good to know that a lot of our UCI classroom facility have this kind of a capability for faculty to actually do. But the one thing that I doubt, is something that, yes, it is something that you have used in the digital format in terms of during the remote time. could still continue to carry on in this in-person teaching, which is allowed. And the pool everywhere, I know that's something that I was so excited to see because yeah, iClicker does, student does need to require to purchase an item, but pool everywhere is great. In fact, some of the tools that Matt shared today, we'll be also introducing it on going over a little more in depth next week. So please pay tune and go on. So now I wanted to actually now ask Matthew Mahavuchakul about the actual strategies. And I know its introduction is very similar in this area. And I know that Matt shared a lot of things about some of the strategies, some of tools that you could utilize. But in terms of strategies, what do you recommend a faculty should be mindful or even consider to help them better plan for fall in terms of engaging students with active learning strategies? Matt?
Yeah, thank you. So the one common theme that I've been talking with faculty about over the past year is to consider a flexible format that has a mixture of synchronous and asynchronous activity, but also to use active learning to enhance education and enhance learning. And one thing that I think is really helpful is by thinking about the pandemic and everything that we've learned so far about how students learn, kind of what are the obstacles that not only they're going through, but we're going through, and humanizing the course really goes a long way in terms of getting students to have a positive attitude towards your class, which can then give them more positive attitudes towards buy-in, maybe for some of your teaching techniques. And so one of the things that I always recommend is to prepare for a hybrid format, even if you're teaching in person, just because we don't know what the future is going to hold, especially for fall quarter. And if we do need to transition for a short period of time or for the rest of the quarter, having that structure already in place will allow you to seamlessly move between one mode of instruction and another. So those are the two things that I would say is one, prepare a hybrid course if at all possible. And then two, maintain flexibility. One of the examples that I like to give is having a deadline, but then giving an unpenalized extension, maybe of like 12 hours or 24 hours, so that you can be more flexible with students who are maybe in different time zones. Just like this past summer, I had several students who were taking my course in Japan and some other time zones around the world, and having that extension to the deadline that was unpenalized really helped them. And the feedback was really great as well. And that also created a lot of opportunity for them to create their own learning communities offline that can then supplement with synchronous instruction.
Thanks, Matt. It's, pointer of 2-point flexibility and prepare for the hybrid. And it's something that we should be always consider. The flexibility is always kind of, it comes to our mind. And, in terms of both ends, students and the faculty's end too, because we all going this pandemic together. So we always tell our faculty, it's okay. You don't have to make a perfect video. Just be human on your video. They will love it because we are going through the same situation. So that's great to remind everyone again that even though we are going in person, it might be slightly different from last year, but still, I think having those 2-pointer in mind is going to be really helpful as ongoing, and then also as a backup plan. So thank you so much for pointing those out. Now, last not the least, I would like to ask Adrienne, and asking question about share your just overall experience in teaching actively, and just over the past year as you do, what were the people or even success story that you would like to share, and what is your plan in fall?
There's a lot to cover because I teach 3 classes and they are different classes. So I typed out a list just to kind of help keep things moving along, and I'll share that with you. And it's been a while since people here have had a chance to actually talk. So if you have questions while I'm talking, I'm happy to stop and give quick answers. There'll be time at the end for breakout rooms, so I don't want to, use up all of our good time during the presentation here. But I threw into the chat just a short overview of the 3 classes and the tools that I use so that you don't have to stare at me quite as hard. For introductory biology, I teach it as a flipped class. And so I make pre-class videos and post them in Yuja, which is connected to Canvas. Every pre-class video has an accountability quiz in Canvas that I'll talk about more when I talk about my plan for fall. And for class time, because content is now offloaded to whenever students want to watch the pre-class video, they do that whenever they want to. Class time is all active learning. I do a series of clicker questions that are kind of the most commonly missed parts of biology. They work on the question, I look at the answers. If there seems to be a problem, they talk to their neighbors, and then we go over the right answer, and then I can give a micro lecture on that particular topic if students are still confused. So this happens in PSLH, introductory biology. And so while I'd love to be in the active learning classroom building, this class is not. And so it's a matter of students kind of twisting around and talking to their neighbors. Hopefully they'll be able to do that effectively with masks come fall. For scientific writing, it's a writing class-ish for 400 students. So the tools I use there, our students do kind of collaborative reading of journal articles in Perusall. Then class time is when we write. So they do very little writing outside of class. Almost all of it is during class, and they're encouraged to talk to their neighbors about what's the best way to phrase things and how best to understand the journal articles. We use a lot of Google Docs in scientific writing. They copy a document that's the worksheet for the day, they fill it in, and then they submit the Canvas doc to Canvas as their assignment at the end of class. And then we have a weekly essay quiz in Canvas every week that is taken individually, but it is open note and unproctored. And that actually worked much better than I thought it would. Surviving the year of the pandemic helped me realize how to write questions that were relatively ungoogleable, and that was fine. Lastly, for anatomy, this is a class that has a lot of content to be memorized. That's kind of the goal of anatomy. So rather than making pre-class videos, the videos would be about 10 hours long for every lecture, and students wish I would do that, but I think that's a really awful idea. So instead, I have reading guides that are tightly linked to the textbook and only cover the absolute things that they have to know and leaves out the rest to help focus their studying. They use those reading guides as their study tool. Class time, again, then I'm not worried about covering content, which is good because there's way too much content in anatomy. And instead we do practice problems where I have them label diagrams or connect functions and structures or figure out tables that relate the differences between the different structures. And I'm actually trying to figure out a way to improve submission for that. I haven't found a great tool for submitting a table yet. So if any of you have good ideas, and I need to do it like 5 or 6 times during each class period. So I am definitely open to suggestions and broadening my horizons there. But those are kind of my 3 classes. And you'll notice I don't talk much in class in any of the 3. My goal is to guide students as they work on the content and be there to listen, find out where they're confused, answer problems, and enjoy myself because I'm not there talking the whole time. Does anybody have any questions before I talk about my fall plans? Is that what you want me to do, Bo?
So Sophia has a question. How do you know there is no free writing when they work in group?
For large lectures, generally free writing, I think, is a problem if you have a multiple week group project where there is a lot of opportunity to not do any work. And then get a big reward. In my classes, all group work is ephemeral. It's a turn to your neighbor situation. And when I teach TAs how to lead discussion sections, I say keep the group size to 3. It's a lot harder to free write if there's only 3 of you and your other 2 group members are staring at you and saying, what do you think the answer is? There's just less room to hide there. So I haven't noticed a big problem with free writing. I also have learning assistants, undergraduate learning assistants in my large lectures. And so there is always somebody popping into each small group going, how's it going? What you working on? Do you have any problems? How far have you got? And that also kind of helps keep groups running effectively.
And she also asked, when you randomize questions, does that mean that they answer different questions? But if that is the case, are the topics the same?
So I use in introductory biology quizzes for every lecture. So the one lecture will be on cellular respiration and the quiz will be on cellular respiration. And I'll have about 30 questions in the quiz bank, and the Canvas quiz will give students 6 of the 30. They are allowed to then retake the quiz if they didn't get the grade they wanted, but they will likely get a different 6 questions on cellular respiration the next go round. So it's not nothing to put together these quiz banks. It's relatively easy to make straightforward questions in biology, but it's hard to make exam level questions because they tend to be much higher Bloom's level and more complex. So I am slowly building up exam banks of more difficult questions so that I can give practice exams or examlets so students can get the effect of a timed exam. So yeah, it's like everything else, the first time through a class is a little hairy, and then every time you teach it after that, you add more and more resources and things get cleaner and cleaner and better and better. Okay, let me show you my plan for fall. Just super quick, I'm going to paste it into the same Google Doc that y'all had before. So you should visit it again if you've lost track of the link or didn't think it mattered the first time. There it is again. And here's the plan. So I record my videos. I'm about halfway through. Class starts in 2 weeks. It'll be fine. Recording my videos. I use Camtasia because it's a little bit more flexible, and then upload them to Yuja. My pre-class quizzes are pretty much ready to go from last year. And so I have 27 quiz question banks, and I'm just updating those. Class time, I can show you in the breakout room if you're interested in. It's a PowerPoint with a series of clicker questions with a little bit of lecture in between. And I have a focus on scientific papers and how to read figures and how to understand new science. And so I guide students through one new paper most class periods. My goal is to have a flipped class that is accessible from home. So if a student is quarantining because they might be sore throat or their roommate tested positive and they're just kind of being careful, or if they tested positive, they should be able to watch on Zoom the class and they'll be able to see the slides. And I'm using Poll Everywhere as clickers so they can click in from home as well. I can't guarantee I'll be visible because I'm not one to stand behind the lecture podium. And so using Zoom as live streaming is modest as a tool, but that's kind of what's available in PSLH. So my class does not have to be set up for remote learning. There are some students taking this class remotely, but they're in the other instructors section. So mine is just adequate for students that are remote. If you're sick, don't come, it's fine, stay home, watch the Zoom, see the clicker questions, listen to me talk and click in. We'll try to set up breakout rooms for students who are at home. It's very much if you're feeling sick, you can stay home for a few days with no downside. So that's the plan. Discussions are still planning to be face-to-face, but I do have enough TA time where I can have one TA hold 2 virtual discussion sections. So again, if they're sick for a couple days or 1 week, they can visit a virtual discussion section instead of a face-to-face one, which has the benefit of giving everybody who is face-to-face a little bit of space, right? Which, you know, if you're in a room with PSLH, 400 students, a little bit of space is a good thing. Ed discussion is turned on. Students like it. They especially like to be anonymous in biology. They're very anxious about posting bad questions. So I have that posted there. I do most of the answering just because I have the time available, but TAs are also pretty good at that. And my particular class, I'm having 3 midterms and a final and dropping the lowest of those 4 scores so that if a student does become ill or needs to take care of a family member in a crisis or something, and this is an exam, it's no big deal. They can drop the lowest score and That helps them and it helps me because I don't have to worry about creating makeup exams, which are a huge amount of work. And then I don't have much problem with cheating. My exams are open note, but I tend to write pretty ungoogleable questions. And I tend to give students a pretty tight time window in which to take the test. So there's not a lot of kind of sharing with friends what happened. Okay, I am done talking. That is more talking than I like to do. So if you guys have any questions on that, I'm happy to talk more now or in the breakout rooms, I guess we're calling. But that's kind of how I am planning to go into the fall with a large course. I've got 740 students right now for IntroBio.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much, Adrian, for all your sharing. And this is great. I mean, I think a lot of you guys could take this notes and, you know, just kind of see what your colleagues doing, and it's just exciting. And I do hear a lot of tools are there and you might not be familiar with. Something that we'll be also sharing next week, like at discussion. I know Paul Rivera, we did have questions that usual video quiz. I know Adrian, you have done that too. So something that like that. But you know, I mean, what 3 times always a charming number, right? So as a students to get used to technology as well as for you to also kind of get. So I mean, just the sense that I got is it's not at first time you're gonna be perfect. It's like there's no way. Yeah. So there's gonna be always gonna be some of the learning time and this, and then it will take some time to do it. But you know, the way I'm hearing from Adrian sharing that, yeah, but as you do it, you build up that resources and then also the, you know, other things and then the experience too. So that's hopefully, you know, the time, you know, that you'll be able to do this kind of a exciting stuff for your student too. And I love the fact that you said adequate learning, like flexibility is also, but if you're sick, you know, they're not coming to school, but here you could do that too. So having that kind of a different way to provide, you know, provide your, you know, learning environment to students who, you know, can come. So that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Wow. Now we have 2 more questions that I actually ask all our panel here is that what would you recommend for faculty to get started making their course active learning? So if you guys all take a turn, share just one thing that you like, okay, this, if one thing that you will need to do, I will highly recommend you to do this first. We could start now from Matthew Mahaborchukwu and then Matthew Williams and then Adrian in that order.
Sure. The one thing that I would do is something that Adrian and I both do in our classes is to consider flipping your class.
Thank you. Matt, William?
Well, I would say it's just a basic thing. Introduce some pause and reflection, whether it's a polling question or just students jotting down what they learned. And with everybody in masks, it might also give you a chance to catch your breath and take a short break.
My secret weapon is not technology based, and that's the lowly index card. I have told students to bring a pack of index cards to class every day, and I will use them to grasp answers to old exam questions or have them think of the muddiest point or discuss with their neighbor something and write the answers to some question or dilemma that you're posing. Because the thing I found that is most difficult for students when they're working on something difficult in class is they would really, really, really prefer that you just tell them the answer. It is very painful to commit to something that may or may not be true. And so the value of an index card is it's an accountability tool. Students have to write something down, they put their name on it, they turn it in, they have to commit to an answer before you go over the question. And that will really increase the amount of discussion that you get with other students in the class and the amount of thinking they do if they know they have to submit an answer before you go over the answer. Now, grading those is a pain. So then you do some kind of technique where you grade every other one, or you say you're randomly going to pick 10 and grade those, or, you know, some kind of, or you just force your TAs to do it, or, you know, whatever works for you and your TAs. But index cards are a super low-key, low-drama starter tool for trying active learning in a class. So even if you just do one index card per class period on one old exam question or one posed question, that's a way to get students talking. Oh, index cards are a 3x5 piece of cardstock. So they're just easy to carry around. And if you ask students to get out a piece of scratch paper, you get all kinds of random stuff, and then you have to try and stack them, and it never stacks, and it's a big mess. And you also have to tell them, don't get the little spiral bound index cards where you rip them off and they have the little dingles at the top, and it just makes a huge mess. And you don't get the index cards that are like 8x12 index cards. I mean, students come up with all kinds of stuff. So you really kind of have to be specific. But once that's covered, you can even bring them if you don't have 700 students. It really does encourage accountability and conversation in a class.
That's great, great. All right, so last question, and this one I'm gonna just open up to everybody to start. Any other suggestion for faculty to prepare for fall? Any other suggestion that you didn't get to share? Anybody wants to share that?
I think it was mentioned, but have a backup plan and tell students what that is. If the class needs to go remote for a short period of time or whatever the case may be, make sure students know how they're going to get information or how to get information to you.
Great.
For me, it would be if you are having in-person sections, to use the in-person to enhance learning, not as a requirement for learning, so that those who need to attend remotely don't feel like they are being left behind.
And my suggestion would be that if you're going to try active learning in whatever format, pick something super small and do a bunch of small things rather than try the world's biggest song and dance project case study thing.
All right. Well, I wanted to say thank you so much for all of you coming and sharing your experience and all the expertise and the resources here. And I would like to everybody to give applause to all our panelists here. And thank you so much for coming and sharing. But like I mentioned, we will have a breakout session for all three of them to share if you have more questions to follow up. So now I'm gonna actually start sharing my presentation. So I feel like we already share everything of this, but this is going to be a more like a reminder and what are the resources available for our faculty. So some of the tools and some of the strategies that actually Megan went over a little bit in the beginning, as well as some of the tools that actually all three of them kind of mentioned. So what last year in our DTI instructional designer team when we start pandemic, the first question is, I am an active teacher, and I don't know what to do here. What can I do? So what our team, what we pulled together is something that already our faculty are familiar with, and some of the strategies that you are already familiar with. But what are the things that they could do to implement it in this digital active learning strategy using a different kind of technology tool? So I'm gonna share the 12. The one that we come up with is called 12 digital active learning strategies, which I just shared through a chat. We came up with a 12 different one. So like active learning, when we think about it, is that we first think about student to content, what kind of the check-in. I know a lot of you sharing about something to check students learning as they go through, and not only with the students, but with the content. So pull everywhere or use a video quiz, all those things to really help students to kind of process their learning. So that's an area, one of the interactives, the student to content interactive, and also talking about student to instructor interactive, how the reflection, like kind of sharing, how are they processing the content, or even letting it out. And I love the way that how Adrian mentioned about the modest point, or something that students get a chance to ask question or even share what are they doing with it and how they're doing with that. And then mostly a lot of you may share about is a student, which is learning to really build that learning community, to really having that area to mingle with student to student, their peer, to really learn the content, enhance the improving their learning process of as they're working together with their their friends in the class. So these are the three basic interaction. Based on that, what we came up with the 12 strategies that you already are familiar with. And then with that, what we provide is that we provide the topic of strategy, and then it talks about name, and then we talks about what are this, just in case if you're not familiar with it. And also what this kind of a tool strategy will be really good for what kind of class size, because I know a lot of you see we have a small tool. I know Adrian shared about 750 students, like large class. So can I use this in a small class? Can I use a bigger class? So kind of sharing some of the kind of recommendation or suggestion. And then also mainly that what we plug it in is how can you do this in remotely, online based, and the utilizing the online tool. So we provided in a way the synchronous versus the asynchronous version. So we provided this different strategies that we would like to share with you. Please go ahead and look at it. This is something that we are still continue building up as we go through it. So if you have a different suggestion on how you dealt with this, implemented this strategy in a different way, please share with us. We would love to add it to our digital active learning strategy, so that we'll share with our colleagues here. So these are the 12 strategies that we came up. And then the main reason we came up with this is because something that you are familiar with, something that you could already start doing it quickly, a simple step and one at a time. And that's another reason that we kind of divvied it up. But we divvied it up in a way that is meeting all these different, 3 different ways to interact students with different things.